let's jump straight into this explainer. Today we're uncovering the thrilling, ancient, and honestly pretty terrifying origins of stories you probably thought you already knew. We're talking about the Arabian Nights. If you're someone who loves stories packed with mystery, romance, sweeping adventure, and just a dash of horror to keep you on the edge of your seat, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down exactly where these massive legends came from and the real life or death stakes that literally forced them into existence.
So to kick things off, I want you to ask yourself a literal life or death question. What would you do if keeping your audience hooked was the only thing keeping you alive? It's so easy to think of storytelling as just, entertainment. But I want you to imagine a scenario where your very breath depends on someone else desperately wanting to know what happens next. It's the ultimate storytelling survival strategy. And as you'll see, it's the exact intense foundation of the tales we're looking at today.
At its core, the Arabian Nights, or 1001 Nights, is way more than you might realize. These aren't just simple fairy tales dreamed up by one person in a cozy room. No, this is a massive, multicultural collection of ancient Middle Eastern folktales. We're talking about incredibly rich, complex stories that were gathered and meticulously compiled over hundreds of years. They pull from the vast cultural traditions of Persia, India, and Arabia. It is, without a doubt, a historical treasure trove of human imagination. But the framing story behind how these tales were actually told, well, the stakes are horrifyingly high. It all revolves around a ruler named King Shahryar, and he had this lethal habit, which sets our entire premise into motion. Every single night, he would marry a new woman, and by morning, he made absolutely sure she was permanently gone. It's an incredibly dark, tyrannical setup. That is, until a brilliant, deeply courageous young woman named Sherazade steps up to become his wife, armed with literally nothing but her wit and a master plan to outsmart him. So, how did she actually pull this off? Well, she masterminded this incredibly ingenious survival loop. Check this out. Hour 1, she marries the king. A few hours later, she casually starts spinning this captivating, completely mesmerizing story. But then, right at dawn, literally the exact moment her time is supposedly up, she stops. Just abruptly stops on a massive cliffhanger. The king, desperate to know what happens next, spares her life for just one more day. She looped this exact high-pressure sequence for 1001 nights. Her imagination literally kept her breathing. And this brilliant strategy birthed 3 specific, absolutely legendary tales that she spun purely from her imagination. We're talking Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, and Sinbad the Sailor. You probably recognize these famous names from pop culture, right? But the original versions she told to save her life, they are vastly different, way more complex, and honestly, much wilder than you can probably imagine. First up, we've got Alibaba. This is the story of a poor woodcutter who stumbles onto a secret cave full of treasure, accessible only by a magic password. You know the one. But it's not just some fun get-rich-quick adventure. No, it is packed with deep mystery and some serious horror elements when 40 incredibly dangerous, ruthless thieves realize their gold is missing and come hunting him down for revenge. You really don't see the ending coming in the original text.
Then there's our second tale, Aladdin. And man, there is a stark contrast between what we expect today and the dark original. Everyone thinks they know this one inside out. But the original Arabian Nights version? It features a mysterious sorcerer, a young boy literally trapped underground in absolute pitch blackness, and a genie with terrifyingly unlimited power. It's action, horror, and romance all packed into one intense narrative that is a far cry from the modern adaptations.
But for today's explainer, our main deep dive actually focuses on the number 7. Why 7? Well, that's the number of terrifying, mind-bending voyages endured by the star of our third tale, Sinbad the Sailor. 7 distinct voyages filled with sea monsters, giant birds, cannibal giants, and unimaginable treasures. I mean, this man went through things that would make most of us never want to leave our living rooms again, yet he somehow kept going back for more. Because that, my friends, is what true adventure looks like. So, let's set the scene for Voyage 1. Who exactly is Sinbad? I mean, he wasn't always this hardened, rugged sailor. He was actually a wealthy kid, a merchant from Baghdad who inherited a huge fortune from his dad, and then promptly blew it all living large. It's a classic rich kid moment gone totally wrong. Now broke, humbled, and completely desperate, he decides to go to sea as a trader to try and rebuild his lost wealth.
So he loads up a merchant ship, sets sail. And honestly, at first, everything is totally smooth sailing. Beautiful ocean, perfect weather, successful trades at various ports along the way. But then, the ship stops. The captain drops anchor near what looks like this idyllic, small, lush green island just sitting right there in the middle of a calm, beautiful ocean. It sounds like absolute paradise, right?
The exhausted passengers are obviously thrilled by the sight of it. I mean, who wouldn't be? They disembark to stretch their legs and finally get to relax. They start setting up camp, lighting fires to cook their meals, and just soaking in the feeling of solid ground after weeks at sea. It paints this perfect picture of absolute peace and tranquility. But it was way too peaceful, because here is the terrifying truth, the massive plot twist that Scheherazade drops on the king to make absolutely sure she survives another night. They weren't standing on an island at all. What they thought was solid ground, what they had been happily building their cooking fires upon, it was something entirely different.
The original text describes this horrifying reality. It was an enormous, ancient whale. I mean, just think about the sheer terrifying scale of that for a second. This was a gigantic sea beast that had been floating so perfectly still at the surface of the water for so many long years that thick soil and actual trees had literally grown on its back. The passengers were casually walking around on a living, breathing leviathan.
And you can probably guess what happens next. The moment the intense heat from those cooking fires started burning through its thick skin, the whale woke up. It instantly plunged straight down into the deep ocean. Imagine the absolute real-life chaos playing out here. Screaming people violently thrown into the churning, freezing sea, the merchant ship scrambling in a total panic to escape, basically leaving practically everyone else behind to their doom.
Which brings us to an incredibly tense question. How do you survive alone, in the open ocean, in just a wooden tub? Because that is exactly the dire situation Sinbad just found himself in. With his ship totally gone, his friends drowned or scattered, and everything he owned lost to the deep, he frantically grabs a floating wooden tub from the wreckage and holds on for dear life. He is left paddling alone for hours in the dark, endless ocean. Truly, the stuff of absolute nightmares.
For hours, he's just floating in that little tub, totally at the mercy of the vast sea. Until finally, miraculously, the winds and the waves push him toward a shore, a real island this time. Barely alive, shivering, and completely exhausted, Sinbad crawls onto the sand. He looks around, probably expecting rescue or maybe more danger, but what does he find? Just thick, dense jungle and total, unnerving silence.
And right there, right on that silent beach, the sun begins to rise outside King Shahryar's window. And Scheherazade, she just stops talking. Boom. That right there is her life-saving genius in action. Leaving Sinbad stranded on that silent island, leaving the king and, well, all of us, desperately wanting to know what happens next. Stranded in the silent jungle with nothing but a wooden tub, what would you do next? It perfectly proves the undeniable, enduring power of a massive cliffhanger. It kept her alive, and it kept these incredible stories alive for centuries. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you intensely curious to uncover the rest of Sinbad's